Hello and welcome to Tatparya Books. The book I'm going to review today is Invisible Empire: The Natural History of Viruses by Pranay Lal. But before I get into the book itself, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to ramble on about nonfiction and how good nonfiction has actually become. I have never seen such diverse range of topics being covered under nonfiction and written by such great writers or writers who are writing so well as it is being done nowadays. In fact, I wouldn't be wrong, or it's probably the right thing to say that this is a golden age for nonfiction writing and a golden age conversely for nonfiction reading. It's never been this easy for just a normal person or a layperson to pick up a good book about an obtuse topic and get into it and get a sense of it, get to know the characters, the scientists or the historians who worked in it without actually feeling like you're carrying a great burden or it's some kind of knowledge being imparted to you. In this genre of nonfiction, the subgenre that I look forward to reading some new books is the pop science. And pop is not the correct word for it because pop somehow denotes that it's being dumbed down. I don't agree. Pop music, I love pop music more than anything else. But pop, I think here refers to something that is in my this is my definition. Don't hold me to it. But pop science for me is something that takes a really difficult scholarly topic and then makes it accessible by with good writing. So the key for me of what makes it a good book is how interesting the topic it covers and how well it is actually written. Call it pop science, call it non-fiction, call it maybe even fiction, but that should be the basis for actually selecting a great book. Unless you've really been living under a rock for the last 2 years, the topic of viruses that this book covers should be instantly attractive to you. And maybe, I mean, it's true. There is a case to be made that maybe we've had too much about viruses. We've read too much, we've heard too much, we've discussed too much about viruses. And in that sense, a book about viruses is probably 2 years too late. But the way I don't see it that way, I think that exactly because of that, exactly because of the fact of what a virus can do and the ramifications it can have on this world and on our lives, a book like this is never out of time, and more so now. I find that when you get a good book, when you get a good science book that gives you a deeper understanding in some way of the topic, it gives you a better context to understand everything else that you're reading and experiencing and hearing in today's world. And it comes from so many areas. I mean, you can get this information from Facebook or news, but when you actually read a book that covers that topic from end to end, you actually get a better sense of what the topic is all about. And I think that context, that idea, that ability to make sense of everything that you're reading now with the background of what you've already learned in the past is very, very important, more than any other time today. Because today we live in a world where we are expected to make instant judgments about something. So having that leg up in knowing a topic and understanding a topic, even though that's probably beaten to death in the mainstream media, and getting that information from a book could actually make all the difference. I've actually read the earlier book by Pranay Lal, Indica, which is the geological history of India. And I found that book to be simply superb. I reviewed it on Goodreads. I'll link that review down below. And I enjoyed it thoroughly. It covered an area that I knew nothing about in a way that made it so much more easy for me to understand my own environment and my own world here in India and how it got to be the way it got to be. So when I actually saw An Invisible Empire, another book by Pranay Lal on the bookshelves, I was instantly attracted to it. I knew I was going to read it anyway. And I'm not sorry for it. I've actually liked reading this book, but we'll get into that a little later. The book itself is divided into 14 chapters, and it covers everything from the origin of viruses and why viruses are important, and the kind of viruses which are there, what they do really well, how they help you, and how they are obviously harmful for you. And in the process, some of the history and discovery of viruses, and how we got to find out more about viruses. So in general, a good non-fiction science book which covers the topic from end to end. And uh, and I like the book. I said I already liked the book, but I initially, to be fair, the first maybe 20-25 pages, I found it difficult to get into. It wasn't so much the writing, but the amount of information that I was getting in the book, all the terms and terminology Pranay Lal was using, made it a little bit more, uh, effort took a little longer for me to understand what was happening. But once I got through that hurdle, once I went through that phase, it just became smoother and smoother. Once the terms just become easy and you get to know, you kind of make an image of what is happening. It's just very easy to get into. And uh, and I, by the end of the book, I felt like I got a better sense of how we ended up being, affected by a virus back in 2020 and still getting affected by it right now. I don't think I can be called an expert, but I think I can have a pretty interesting conversation with experts when I meet someone. Okay, so the main thing about this book that really, I think it's become a brand with Pranay Lal now, is that his books are objects to possess. I mean, they have wonderful illustrations. This was this case with Indica, where I think, if I'm not wrong, I think a large portion of the illustrations in the book, and there were many, many of them, were hand drawn, or hand painted. They weren't really pictures or photographs. And in this case, he has more photographs, but yet this experience of reading something which is not just black and white print, but you have color pictures and interactive pictures that are a part of the book, actually make it more like browsing a really good web page on the internet. I think it sort of competes with the experience of browsing through a good web page, and it's something in a book. And the thing that happens where you have images that are included in the book, but they either repeat the same topic that's been written in the main page, or they give, the notes at the bottom of the image sort of covered the same area all over again. That doesn't happen with this book. In this book, the images tell a completely different story. Not a completely different story, of course, related to the text, but it's not really covered in the text. It's often almost an entire page, and with a substantial note underneath it, where you get to know, or you get to read something else about that particular topic that he's covering in that book, which is different from what's already been covered, and which is related to what is in the image. Sometimes I found it distracting, because you're in a flow with the main writing, and then you have to break that to try to find out what's exactly happening in the picture. I wish that was integrated a little better, but not really. Once I got used to it, I was okay. I knew when to break. I knew I didn't want to go to the image. I'll wait a little longer, finish whatever I'm reading, and then get to the image. My only real qualm is that some of these images are entirely black, and the font and the color of the font makes it really difficult to read that. But I wish they could have taken care. Somebody, maybe the editor or someone had taken care of that. But I didn't mind it much. Beyond it, didn't. It wasn't something that put me off the book. So yeah, so I like the book. I've already said that a couple of times, haven't I? But yeah, so I like the book. It's great. I think you should read it. My experience was that it took a little longer for me to get into the book, but once I got into it, I loved it. I love the illustrations. I love the story the illustrations say. And I really liked some of the chapters. There were two chapters that really stood out for me. There is a chapter about the smallpox virus, and then the Tulip Fever in Netherlands back in 16th or 17th century, which was great. Great reads. It combined all the topics that I really love, and I I recommend that you read Invisible Empire by Pranay Lal. And thank you for watching Tatparya Books. See you next week.